It all starts on Christmas Eve, with the streets covered in snow and filled with people enjoying the festive mood. The city's atmosphere is cheerful, with decorations sparkling everywhere you look. A family walks by together, and their little daughter cheers that it was the best day ever. They stroll happily, walking right past a lone man watching the scene. The little girl looks around in awe, captivated by all the lights. Jo-won watches the family and wonders why he always has to shrink himself to make way for others. Walking through the crowd, it feels perfectly normal to be the only person flying solo on the entire street. With that thought, our main character continues on his way, heading down the stairs toward the subway. But suddenly he stops in his tracks. He notices something unusual and is taken by surprise. Nearby, he realizes there's another person who's all alone on this cold night. It's a Santa Claus, kneeling in the snow, looking pretty miserable. A sign asks people to tell the old man a wish, something Jo-won would normally just ignore. However, since it's the exact anniversary of the day his parents passed and left him on his own, he decides to crouch down. Pulling his wallet from his pocket, the guy takes out a few bills to donate to the stranger. Handing over the cash, Jo-won offers the amount and comments that the bill is still in good shape. He carefully places the money inside the donation box. Surprisingly, Santa grabs his hands with a tight grip and thanks him for his incredible kindness. The old man insists he wants to return the favor and demands to know the guy's wish. Thinking the man is completely nuts, our MC tries to break free from that freakish grip. However, the strength in the stranger's hands is absurd, leaving Jo-won in total shock. He tries to pull his arms back with all his might but can't move a single inch. Santa begs him, explaining he can't go back to his village until he grants the wish of a kind soul. Just wanting to get out of the situation, the guy agrees to say his wish if the man promises to let him go. Facing the old man, he finally begins to state his request. He asks to win the lottery, but the man sighs in disappointment and asks for a wish that comes from the bottom of his heart. Jo-won gets serious when he hears that request. In a heartfelt confession, he admits that he needs a family that will always be by his side and never leave him. Holding the stranger's hand tightly, he specifies that he wants a very cute wife and daughter. The old man gets emotional, claiming he can feel the purity of that wish from such a lonely soul. Feeling incredibly lucky, Santa says he's found someone with a soul similar to his own. With a bizarre look in his eyes, he promises to find him a pure wife and a beautiful daughter who respects her father. Wishing him a life full of joy, the old man finally releases the young man's hands. Jo-won immediately bolts, muttering that the guy was a complete lunatic. In the background, the man shouts that he will use all his power to grant the wish, which really freaks our MC out. A short time later, the subway train arrives at the station. Already inside the car, the young man holds onto a support bar to keep his balance during the ride. He rests his head on his arm, trying to make sense of the nonsense that crazy guy was spouting. Even though he thinks the guy was nuts, he reflects on the real reason he revealed his deepest desire. Looking at a family ad on the train, he admits to himself that he just wanted to be happy too. Worn out from the day, he simply closes his eyes to get some sleep. Suddenly, he smells something strange, feels an intense cold, and hears the sound of something rocking back and forth. Waking up confused, our MC slowly gets up, still a bit dizzy from it all. He opens his eyes in alarm, not understanding a thing that's happening. Instead of the subway, he's now inside a wooden carriage passing through a medieval village. Completely bewildered, Jo-won screams, asking where he is, realizing he's been locked in a cage in nothing but his underwear. Beside him, he sees a man with long, dirty hair. The prisoner looks exhausted and in terrible shape. Looking around, the guy notices several men in the same situation and figures he's been thrown back to the Middle Ages. At this point, he's just frozen, unable to react to the sheer insanity of it all. Trying to listen to the guards outside, the MC realizes he can't understand a single word of their language. Taking in the medieval scenery and the lack of any other Asian people, he tries to process what's going on. Soon, the terrifying conclusion that he's been dropped into another world hits him. Flashes of him disappearing from the subway car race through his mind. Shivering badly from the cold, he huddles barefoot on the cage floor. Noticing a fallen prisoner, Jo-won realizes the man has passed away and decides to focus on his own survival. Apologizing to the body, he begins to take the clothes off the deceased man. With that, he puts on the dead man's shirt to try and warm up a little. Now wearing the old clothes, he sits down, exhausted, and remembers Santa's promise to grant his wish. Lying on the filthy floor, the guy wonders if he completely misunderstood what the old man meant by happiness. Hoping it's all just a nightmare, He has no idea how many days have passed since he arrived in this place. The carriage keeps moving relentlessly along dirt roads in the middle of a forest. Huddled in a corner, the guy concludes that everyone in here is a slave, including himself. Watching the armed guards, he understands why they're being carted around from place to place. The whole point of this trip is to sell them like merchandise in different locations. Finally, the lock on the cage is opened. The soldiers line the prisoners up outside while a village chief picks out the healthiest ones. Even though it hurts his pride to admit he's a slave, our MC starts to feel a glimmer of hope. Knowing he has a good physique, Jo-won believes he'll be bought quickly and will be able to escape. This becomes the first light at the end of the tunnel since he fell into this bizarre world. But reality hits hard, and he sinks into despair after being rejected in several villages in a row. The journey continues without end, passing through various camps. The carriage follows its path down the dirt road with the remaining prisoners. Thrown onto the cage floor, he's completely devastated, unable to understand how his life hit rock bottom like this. Remembering his mother's advice to live life to the fullest, the guy questions if there's any reason left to stay alive. Thinking back to his childhood, Jo-won still tries to process whether that whole wish business was for real. Lying on the cage floor, he asks his deceased parents if he can really endure this miserable situation. In his mind, the old man's promise to use all his power to grant his request echoes. Furious with all that nonsense about happiness, he tells both worlds to go to heck. Clenching his fist tightly, the guy concludes that the one thing that matters right now isn't some romantic wish. With that, he bangs on the bars, thinking that true peace would be to end it all and escape the pain. However, he quickly pulls back hurt, admitting to himself that's not the answer. Deep down, our MC just doesn't want to perish in a hole like this without ever having a family. Completely desolate, he just accepts his deplorable reality in a heavy silence. Suddenly, a hand appears, holding out a piece of bread toward him. Lifting his head, the guy sees a very kind woman outside the cage offering him the food. She says something he can't understand, but her kindness leaves him stunned. Right behind her, a very cute little girl watches the scene, shyly holding onto the bars. Even without speaking the language, our MC is speechless at the kindness of these two. The scene then cuts to a small, peaceful wooden cabin isolated in the middle of the forest. Inside the house, the woman and little Lizzie are sitting at a table having a simple meal. The little girl drinks her soup very politely, holding the bowl with both hands. Wanting to take good care of the child, the mother pushes a plate with more food toward her. Lizzie silently looks at the food as her stomach lets out a loud growl. Knowing her mother is hungry too, the girl refuses the offer so the woman can eat. But her mother gently insists, assuring her that the child needs this food just as much as she does. With great affection, she slowly slides the plate back across the table. She tries to reassure her, stating that the two of them will get through the hard times together. Just then, loud knocks on the door cut through the atmosphere, with the village chief calling from outside. The woman yanks Lizzie into a hug as the man announces that the council has decided to force her to marry one of the slaves. In shock, the woman hears the order that she must take the stranger into the mountains the next day. The elder tells her to prepare food and meet the soldiers at dawn, then leaves. In the darkness of the cabin, the woman panics, terrified at the thought of being hit by a husband again. Trembling with fear, she knows there's no way to escape this village in the middle of nowhere. Looking at the little girl sleeping in her lap, she decides she could never abandon her. Clutching her chest, the woman feels she has no right to leave the child alone in the world again. A painful memory of Lizzie with tears in her eyes flashes through her mind. The memory of the little one's desperate cries simply breaks the mother's heart. Back then, the poor little girl was always completely isolated, sobbing on the floor. Remembering her own youth, the woman recalls the terrible fear of not knowing what her future would hold. Curled up in a corner of the house, she suffers deeply just thinking about reliving that whole nightmare. Still, the sadness eases a bit when she looks at her daughter. Seeing Lizzie hugging a teddy bear, she understands that abandonment hurts them both the same way. This little 5-year-old orphan lost her father tragically and didn't even have a name until recently. Inevitably, the woman remembers the day her own father sold her for a single rabbit pelt. As soon as she set foot in the village, her former husband beat her mercilessly before she could even unpack. The man kicked her violently just because she took a little longer than expected to arrive. Attacked over something so trivial, the reality sank in that this cursed life was just beginning. Lying on the floor covered in bruises, the harsh truth completely crushed her spirit. But it was in that exact terrible moment that a small child quietly approached her. Devastated on the wooden floor, the young woman slowly lifted her eyes to see what was happening. In that living hell, the pure, worried gaze of little Lizzie shone in her direction. Without saying a word, the little girl simply lay down next to her injured body to keep her company. This angel, like little girl, was the only one to show her the slightest bit of compassion in the entire village. Curiously, the violent husband went into the mountains that day and was never seen again. A rumor soon spread that the abusive man had become Wolf Cho during a hunt. Despite the immense relief she felt upon hearing of his passing, a new kind of desperation took hold of the widow. She knew all too well how this despicable society worked. Surviving without a husband to maintain her status left her completely vulnerable to everyone. Living on their own, the two walk through the village feeling the weight of abandonment and danger. Back in the present at the village entrance, they hear the sound of approaching wheels. With an innocent air, the little one excitedly points to the huge carriage arriving. The two watch intently as the vehicle stops in the middle of the dirt road, kicking up dust. Driven by curiosity, the woman decides to go over for a closer look. And that's exactly how she comes face to face with Jo-won, caged like an animal. The young man's deeply exhausted and desperate look has an immediate and powerful impact on her. In that split second, the terrible memory of her husband attacking her for being useless comes flooding back. Reliving the hair, pulling an angry shout sends a chill straight up her spine. The threatening shadow of that cruel man still haunts her thoughts daily. Faced with someone as broken as she once was, the woman's eyes begin to tear up. She can see in our MC the same silent suffering that she and her daughter endured in the past. Acting on pure instinct, the woman takes a small loaf of bread from her straw basket. With the child by her side, the two walk toward the carriage, wary of the soldiers. Through the iron bars, the woman extends the food toward the starving slave. Completely surprised, Jo-won freezes at this gesture of compassion in such a dark world. But the peace is short-lived as men from the village approach, asking if the prisoners have arrived. The elder orders the woman to go home immediately, taking over the reception of the soldiers. Unable to defy the order, the mother calls her daughter, and they turn their backs to the cage. Before leaving for good, the sweet little girl takes one last look at the man in the cage. Clutching the bread in his hands, the guy watches the family walk away with a mix of sadness and hope. Jo-won quickly devours the bread, trying to satisfy his hunger inside the cage. But his small meal is cut short when the guards aggressively shout and open the door. With that, the guy is yanked out of the carriage without the slightest care. He ends up falling face first onto the ground, dropping his food as his stomach growls loudly from weakness. Taken to an open field, the village leader starts giving instructions to the soldiers. Suddenly, the guards draw their swords and hold them to the slaves kneeling on the grass. Using his blade, one of the soldiers cuts the ropes binding a prisoner's hands. Right after he activates some kind of magic contract that glows brightly in the air. Completely exhausted, our MC just sighs, having no idea what kind of world he's ended up in. Further ahead, a guard approaches another, older slave to begin the process. Jo-won remains on his knees, passively waiting for his turn. In silence, he just watches the activity around him. The scene cuts to a peaceful view of trees, swaying near the wooden village. A large sack of supplies is left on the ground, with an order that it must be taken to the cabin. The woman hears from an elder woman that she'll have to pay for everything later, as the village is fronting the initial supplies. The old woman is blunt, mentioning that the whole village hated the man who passed away. She hopes the new partner will be different, believing he might just be a commoner. Sitting on the floor with her daughter, the mother listens as the elder says the outsider has soft hands, like a nobleman. Holding the young woman's hands, the old woman assures her that someone like that has never hit anyone. A little more relieved, the woman thanks her and says she doesn't need much to live well. She confesses that her only hope is that this man isn't aggressive. Cuddled with little Lizzie in bed, the woman accepts that it's enough if he just leaves them alone in a corner. Suddenly, very loud knocks on the cabin door shatter the morning silence. The woman wakes with a start and jumps up, clutching the little girl in her arms. Just then, the wooden door is violently thrown open, causing a huge surprise. The village chief appears in the doorway, announcing he's finally brought her promised husband. Quite tense, she just nods at the elder's order to bring the man inside. Jo-won steps through the door completely disoriented, trying to figure out where the heck he is now. The chief shoves the guy, annoyed, complaining about how long he took to enter the house. Huddled on the floor, The woman tries to absorb the fact that this stranger will be her husband. Looking at the guy's size, she feels quite intimidated by his presence in the room. Soon, Jotwan also focuses his attention on the two figures huddled in the corner. He quickly recognizes her as the same person who offered him food earlier. However, our MC soon notices that the woman is trembling with fear. Losing patience, the village chief gives the guy a shove on the back, demanding some action. With a violent tug, the elder drags him directly over to the woman. He places the two of them side by side in a very clumsy way, complaining about the couple's awkwardness. The old man grabs their hands without any warning. With a swift motion, the leader forces the guy's and the woman's hands together. Satisfied with the result, the man laughs and says that now they look like a real couple. Jotwan is very confused by the whole situation, as he doesn't understand a single word of the language. The bizarre memory of Santa promising him a pure wife and an obedient daughter flashes through his mind. Looking at the scared young mother, he pictures her as a small, harmless rabbit. Next, he looks at the little girl and compares her to a tiny, defenseless hamster. Standing there holding the woman's hand, it finally dawns on him that the crazy old man kept his promise. Looking at this fragile family, he admits that his wish came true. But the memories of the hell he went through locked in that cage come back to haunt him. The guy clenches his fists, thinking it was totally unnecessary to be thrown into another world like that. Overcome by an immense fury, he swears he'll take out that Santa if he ever sees him again. His angry, murderous aura deeply frightens the woman and little Lizzie. Later, Jotwan follows the leader and an older hunter down a forest trail. Walking right behind them, the guy is already going crazy from not understanding a single thing they're saying. Suddenly, the older hunter stops walking and turns toward our MC. The man extends his hand in a friendly gesture, leaving the outsider a bit surprised. Believing it's a common greeting, the guy reciprocates and shakes the villager's hand. However, the man squeezes with an absurd amount of force, making Jotwan wonder if this is the local way of saying hello. Soon, our MC notices the malice in the hunter's eyes and realizes he's being tested. With that, he decides to squeeze back with much more force, making the guy scream in desperation. The hunter drops to his knees, crying in pain, feeling the bones in his own hand nearly break. After letting the man go, Jotwan watches him writhing on the grass, while the elder keeps talking. Still trembling, the hunter hands a simple wooden bow to the young man. With the weapon in hand, Jotwan finds the gesture strange but concludes they don't want to fight. The villager points into the woods and makes a bizarre gesture with his hands on his head. Crouching on the ground, the man imitates a hopping animal, completely embarrassing himself in front of them. Understanding the ridiculous charade, our MC deduces that he needs to learn how to hunt rabbits. Suddenly, the hunter grabs the outsider's shoulder firmly to get his attention. Pointing excitedly into the bushes, he indicates he's found the perfect target. Hidden among the leaves, a fluffy white rabbit peacefully chews on grass. The man tells him to shoot immediately, making the guy tense up since he's never used a bow in his life. Kneeling on the ground, he positions the arrow, wondering how he's going to hit something so small. Focusing all his strength, Jotwan pulls the bowstring to its limit, aiming at the animal. The arrow is released with impressive speed, flying straight past the rabbit and embedding itself violently in the ground. The hunter and the guy are left speechless at the damage caused by the insane impact. In total shock, our MC stares at his own hands, trying to understand what kind of crazy strength that was. Meanwhile, back at the cabin, the woman and little Lizzie anxiously await the man's return. Surprised by the damage he caused, Jotwan just stares at his own display of strength in disbelief. A bit awkward about the whole situation, he just scratches his face, trying to play off the absurdity of what just happened. At that moment, the guy sees the woman approaching with little Lizzie and reflects that she is now his wife. His heart skips a beat as he faces this new, fragile reality head-on. The hunter remains terrified in the background, while the family just watches the scene from a distance, not understanding a thing. Later, the three of them sit together on a blanket in the forest for a quiet meal. Jotwan devours his food quickly under the watchful, silent gazes of the woman and the little girl. Holding his bowl of stew, he focuses on regaining his energy after so much stress in the cage. While our MC eats with gusto, the woman eats much more reservedly and shyly. Finishing her meal, she politely wipes her mouth, making the guy pause his own eating to watch her. He remains silent for a moment, just taking in the company of these two. Soon, a sense of calm washes over him at the peaceful scene. Spending time with them here, the guy admits that the word, family, has always been a foreign concept in his life since he was a teen. However, he reflects that an entire family was basically handed to a lonely guy like him on a silver platter. Logically, it would be better if things had happened naturally, but given the crazy circumstances, he figures the order of events doesn't really matter. Sighing heavily, our MC admits he feels like taking out that Santa, but at the same time, he feels a sense of gratitude. Resting on the grass, he mentally thanks the old man for keeping his bizarre Christmas Eve promise. After this short break, their routine starts moving at a very fast pace along the trail. Carrying the heavy sacks of supplies, Jo-won walks ahead, wondering if the two are managing to keep up. Right behind him, the woman and little Lizzie walk breathlessly, clearly exhausted from the long journey. Seeing their fatigue, the guy gets very frustrated that he can't even ask if they're okay, because of the language barrier. Determined to change that, he promises himself he needs to adapt to this world as quickly as possible. Suddenly, the outsider stops firmly in the middle of the dirt road. An old memory of his mother surfaces, teaching him that you should never hesitate when you have someone to protect. In the bright memory, she assures her son that he must act immediately the moment he feels that urge to care for someone. Motivated by this memory, Jo-won looks over his shoulder toward his new family. Without a second thought, he turns around and walks directly toward the tired woman and child. Seeing the giant man approaching, little Lizzie gets terrified and lets out a fearful whimper. Trying to be as gentle as possible, the guy kneels in front of the little girl, asking her not to be scared. The girl's mother is in complete shock, fearing something aggressive is about to happen. Acting on pure protective instinct, the woman steps in front of her daughter, desperately saying something to try and stop the outsider. Hiding behind her mother, the little girl trembles and cries softly, thinking they're about to get hit. Seeing their absolute panic, our MC realizes he shouldn't have approached them with such a serious expression. Very calmly, he asks for their pardon for a moment as he moves toward them. In a quick and careful motion, Jo-won lifts little Lizzie into his arms. Immediately after, he wraps his other arm around the mother, lifting the young woman off the ground with no difficulty. Now the guy is carrying the heavy sacks of supplies on his back and his entire family in his arms. Standing in the middle of the trail supporting all that weight, he shows no sign of physical effort. Settled in his arms, the little girl's eyes widen, completely confused by the big guy's actions. On the other side, the woman is also speechless, not understanding why she's being carried like this. Appearing calm, our MC just tells them both to hold on tight. He starts walking through the forest again as if it were nothing, finding the weight of the two of them absurdly light. Bothered by how thin his family is, he concludes that he needs to learn to hunt quickly to feed them meat. Looking at the woman's face so close to his, Jo-won realizes he has a huge job ahead of him to keep them all well. Feeling the safety of that warm embrace, the woman slowly rests her head on his shoulder. She clutches the fabric of the guy's shirt tightly, finding a comfort there she never imagined she'd have. Nestled in her new husband's arms, the young woman watches him in silence with a much more serene look. The peaceful walk continues down the trail, following the village elder toward their new home. They finally arrive at the isolated cabin, with the chief saying his goodbyes and thanking them for the company. The old man turns and walks away, leaving the new family alone in front of the simple residence. Sizing up the deplorable state of the wooden house, the guy fears it might be even colder than his old rented room. A memory of him with chattering teeth in the winter comes to mind, reinforcing how much he hates low temperatures. Pushing his worries aside for a moment, he places his hand on the rustic doorknob. As he pushes the door open to enter, Jo-won lets out a gasp of surprise at what he sees inside. Right behind him, the woman enters the cabin and freezes in complete shock. Confused by her intense reaction, our MC immediately asks why she's suddenly crying. Unable to hold back, the woman runs right past him into the house. The guy follows her frantic movements, not understanding a single thing that's going on. Standing in the doorway, he surveys the empty room, trying to process the scale of the problem. He then discovers that the villagers broke in and stole absolutely all their furniture and survival tools. Distressed by the cowardly looting, our MC concludes he has no way to fix the house or defend them from wild beasts. Going out to the back of the property, he finds his wife collapsed on the forest floor. Trying to offer some comfort, Jo-won calmly sits down next to her on the grass. Very delicately, the guy reaches out and starts stroking the woman's head. Caressing her brown hair, he tries to soothe the tears of someone who has just lost everything. Looking into her eyes, he gently asks the young woman not to worry about the situation. Crying hard, the woman feels that he's trying to reassure her and reflects on this strange partner. She thinks about the immense difficulty of not even being able to communicate properly and his lack of hunting skills. The doubt about whether they can survive together in this cruel place consumes the young mother's mind. However, the soft and confident expression on the guy's face breaks all the tension of the tragic moment. With a very welcoming smile, Jo-won promises from the heart that he will protect her from everything. Even though she's anxious and full of fears about tomorrow, she receptively gives in to his affection. A tear rolls down her face as a comforting sensation fills her broken heart. Bathed in the late afternoon light, the guy wipes his wife's face with as much tenderness as possible. Faced with so much care from a stranger, she completely relaxes and wonders why she feels so relieved by his side. Our MC hugs the young woman as he thinks about his original world, remembering he lived completely alone since his parents passed away. Despite all that loneliness and hardship, the guy fought hard and endured it all just to keep surviving. Analyzing his new situation, he understands that he now has a family, and there's no reason he can't handle the challenges. To reassure her, Jo-won promises she doesn't need to worry, vowing to do whatever it takes to support them. Not understanding his words, the young woman just cries softly as she leans on his shoulder. Suddenly, a loud noise in the bushes catches the guy's attention, and he turns his head, confused, while the woman remains in his arms. In a desperate leap toward them, the little girl stumbles and cries her eyes out, pleading in her own language for the big guy not to hurt her mother. The little one throws herself against the stranger's leg, holding on tight and trying to protect the woman with all her childish strength. Surprised by the child's actions, our MC sits still on the forest floor, just watching the two of them cry near him. Looking at the scene, he thinks how surreal it is to have a weeping woman suddenly seeking comfort in his arms. On top of that, a little girl is crying while clinging to him, trying to defend her mother, making the whole situation extremely unfamiliar for him. With his head full of questions, he wonders who this child is and why this woman decided to offer him bread earlier. As he gently wipes the tears from her face, the man also wonders what made her break down in tears like that. But putting the uncertainties aside, Jo-won believes that if they continue living together and put in the effort, they will surely become a good family. Holding the young woman in a protective embrace, the guy silently promises to make them very happy, vowing to become a good husband and a good father. Still in the middle of the forest, he swears to himself that neither of them will ever regret becoming his family. Sometime later, the sun begins to set on the horizon, bathing the old, isolated wooden cabin in a golden light. Inside the residence, the three of them sit on the floor in absolute silence, separated by a considerable distance. Jo-won sighs in frustration, thinking they had gotten closer after all the crying, but now he realizes they're back to square one. Seeing the two of them huddled together and staring at him, he feels relieved they're just being cautious instead of terrified. But he has no idea how to break the ice. Just then, a simple idea pops into our MC's head, and he raises his index finger, excited by the solution. The guy quickly adjusts his position on the wooden floor, slightly startling the woman and child with his sudden movement. Pointing directly at his own chest, he acts friendly and clearly introduces himself, saying the name, Kim Jo-won. Pausing between syllables, he repeats the pronunciation to make it easier, concluding they at least need to know each other's names to live together. Realizing the stranger's intention, the young woman repeats his name very shyly and slowly, trying to get the strange pronunciation right. Pleased with his success, Jo-won extends his hand toward her and gently asks her to reveal her name. The woman hesitates for a brief moment, looking away as she thinks about how to respond to her husband's interaction. Then she points her index finger at her own chest and finally says the name, Lizzie, to the guy. Our MC shows great satisfaction with the progress and compliments how nice her name sounds, even knowing she doesn't understand the full sentence. Turning his attention to the little one huddled in the corner, the big guy points at her, wanting to know the child's name. At the question, Lizzie lowers her head in complete silence, leaving the guy confused by the sudden shift in the room's atmosphere. The little girl also shrinks her shoulders with a sad expression, leading Jo-won to ask in shock if she doesn't have a name yet. The mother keeps her gaze downcast, confirming his suspicion that the little one has grown up until now being called just anything. Reaching out his arm, our MC gently touches the child's cheek and says he will give her a name himself, choosing to call her Dorothy. The girl looks up at the big guy with shining eyes, hearing the word Dorothy sound so welcoming in the small room. The guy based his choice on the character from The Wizard of Oz, a girl who goes on adventures with many friends and finds her own happiness. With this simple gesture, he wishes from the bottom of his heart that the little one will grow up to be a lovely child and have a bright future. Still a little uncertain about the news, the little girl repeats the name slowly, testing how the word sounds in her own voice. As soon as the sound comes out, Dorothy shows immense joy, eagerly adopting her new identity. The next day, the silence of the forest is broken by the sharp crack of Jo-won's axe chopping wood outside the cabin. Watching the scene from a distance, Lizzie crosses her arms and reflects that this stranger is a very, very strange man. She notes that even though he has a much larger and more intimidating body than her late husband, the big guy treats her with extreme kindness instead of aggression. The young woman concludes that this new partner is a completely different person from all the cruel villagers she has ever known. Muttering the guy's name softly, she admits she doesn't understand his language, but she notices his pronunciation is refined and his voice has an unusual calmness. Recalling difficult memories from her past, the woman realizes she had never received a shred of kindness from anyone before his arrival. As the guy watches her in a friendly way while he works, Lizzie remains intrigued as to why he is so good to her. Shaking her head, the woman realizes that no matter how hard she tries to understand, this stranger clearly does not belong in this rustic place. Interrupting her thoughts, Jo-won waves with his free hand and calls her name quite cheerfully. The young woman focuses her gaze on the man's face, paying close attention to the dark color of her new partner's hair and eyes. At that moment, an old rumor crosses her mind, recalling that an enemy nation at war had supposedly summoned a legendary hero. The legend described this mythical warrior as having deep black hair and eyes, a striking and fearsome feature. Finishing stacking the wood, our MC walks toward his wife with a very relaxed posture. Staring at his features, the woman can't ignore that the descriptions of this dangerous hero somewhat match the stranger. However, she quickly dismisses this crazy theory, telling herself that someone so powerful would never be lost on this mountain. She deduces that a true hero would live surrounded by luxury in a grand palace, not chopping firewood in a miserable village. When the guy gets very close, Lizzie notices his hair isn't black as night, but more of a brownish shade. Looking closer at the big guy's eyes, she realizes their color also doesn't fit the terrible war legend she's heard. The woman lets out a sigh of relief, concluding that he is just an ordinary man, albeit much larger than the normal peasants. Confused by her own feelings, she wonders why she is feeling so relieved by this silly discovery. After all, the two of them only met today. There's no reason for her to care so much about his true identity. Pushing the doubts from the woman's mind, Jo-won reaches out and affectionately starts stroking the top of her head. The sudden physical contact catches her by surprise, causing her to freeze up, as she's not used to this kind of treatment. The young woman remembers that the only reason a man's hand ever came near her face in the past was to deliver a cowardly blow. Our MC continues to gently stroke his wife's brown hair with slow, comforting movements under the afternoon sun. Surrendering to the pleasant sensation, Lizzie's eyes close heavily, admitting deep down that she wants more of this. With her heart racing, the woman just stands there receiving the touch, silently praying that he never stops caressing her. The guy lowers his face to get a better look at her, his cheeks slightly flushed from their silent proximity. Slowly lifting her gaze, Lizzie shows an expression of complete surrender, her eyes shining with enchantment for her new husband. Completely enveloped by the magical atmosphere of the forest, their bodies are naturally drawn to each other, and they finally press their lips together. The touch is simple and direct, sealing the promise of care and affection Jo-won made since arriving in this world. But right after, our MC jerks his head back, his eyes wide and his face burning with embarrassment. The shock of reality hits the stranger hard, leaving him completely frozen and panicking over his own impulsive action. Turning his face away, the guy stammers a few disconnected syllables, unable to look his wife in the eye after the unexpected kiss. Desperate to escape the immense embarrassment, he quickly turns around and runs toward his work tools. Without any explanation, Jo-won grabs the handle of a wooden bucket tightly, looking for any excuse to get out of there immediately. Our MC dashes into the forest carrying the bucket, fleeing as fast as he can from the awkward situation. Left behind, Lizzie clutches her hands to her chest, completely shocked and her face burning with embarrassment at his sudden action. Already among the trees, the big guy walks along, mentally kicking himself for doing something so crazy, worried about the image his wife now has of him. He smacks his own forehead, remembering that although they're married, they just met that very day. Besides not even being able to communicate properly, the guy has no idea what to do and considers just pretending nothing happened. But suddenly, he stops walking. Looking around, Jo-won realizes the landscape has completely changed, leaving him confused about how far he's walked and where exactly he ended up. The surrounding forest becomes much denser and darker, with the sound of wind rustling through the trees creating a very spooky atmosphere. Trying to stay calm, the stranger decides to just grab some water quickly and head back to the cabin. Just then, he's startled by a sinister presence nearby. Emerging from the dark bushes, a huge creature with black fur blocks his path. The animal reveals itself to be a gigantic wolf with sharp teeth and glowing red eyes. Growling aggressively, the beast makes the guy take a step back, completely frozen with fear. He stares at the massive predator, a chill running down his spine, as he notes the creature's unnatural size. Unable to even react, the stranger drops to his knees, dropping the bucket, paralyzed before his imminent demise. Grasping for any chance of survival, Jo-won quickly grabs a thick branch lying on the ground beside him. Without wasting a moment, the wolf lunges forward, its giant jaws wide open to devour its prey. Using the piece of wood as a shield, the guy manages to block the bite aimed right at his neck. He screams in desperation, straining to keep the beast's teeth away from his face. With a loud crack, the wood can't withstand the brutal pressure and snaps in half. Seizing the opportunity, the wolf sinks its fangs into our MC's left arm, who curses, feeling unbearable pain. Even injured, he refuses to give up and shouts, asking if the beast thinks he's just going to die there. Winding up a punch with his free arm, the stranger declares with fury that he is definitely not going to lose his life. The punch lands squarely on the animal's face, but the impact ends up injuring the guy's own hand. Gritting his teeth in agony, Jo-won feels as if his entire body is on fire. Suddenly, he opens his eyes, shocked by what just happened. An intense bright flame erupts out of nowhere, right between him and the wild animal. Looking at his own right arm, the guy sees that it's completely engulfed in a mysterious fire. Startled by the sudden heat, the beast releases his arm and quickly leaps back. The wolf howls in pain as it tries to deal with the burns left on its snout by the fiery explosion. On impulse, our MC shoves his flaming arm forward, unleashing a blast of fire that completely engulfs the beast. A moment later, the giant wolf drops lifeless to the forest floor, its body charred and smoking. Jo-won collapses onto his back on the grass, completely exhausted, trying to process what just happened after seeing his own arm catch fire. He raises his right hand and inspects the skin carefully. Noticing that his clothes are intact and without any burns, the guy starts to suspect he might have used some kind of magic. At that, he remembers that being dropped into another world and gaining powers is a very common trope in fantasy novels. Picturing the classic scenario of heroes and mages, the stranger thinks the situation fits perfectly. Staring at the palm of his hand, he decides to run a practical test to see if this absurd theory is true. Pointing his arm confidently upward, Jo-won yells, summoning a fireball. He repeats the command several times in different poses throughout the forest, but absolutely nothing happens. Lying on the grass again, the guy tries to command firestorms and walls of flame into the air. Facing the dead wolf, he even resorts to dragon's breath and summoning earth spirits in search of any spark. After trying for so long, the big guy gets a bored look on his face, realizing he's just making a fool of himself. But looking at his left arm, he concludes it wasn't an illusion, as the bite wounds have healed a bit thanks to this mysterious power. Excited by the discovery, he imagines that if he can use this magic freely, he can hunt and provide a much more abundant and happy life for his new family. Lying there, Jo-won also thinks he could treat any of their illnesses with magic, since there are no doctors in this isolated village. Jumping up from the ground, he decides not to rush things and to analyze the whole situation more calmly. However, painful memories flood his mind, recalling the time his grandfather passed away in a bizarre accident right after his parents' death. Back then, his relatives physically attacked him during his grief, blaming him for all the tragedies. Humiliated on the floor, the boy had to listen to his uncle's claim that his family only died because they lived near him. Surrounded by the adults' hatred, the young MC silently accepted being pointed at as the cause of all the misfortunes. Back in the present, the stranger's gaze turns melancholic as he remembers being treated like a walking disaster back when he was in high school. Shaking off those bad memories, he grabs the wolf's leg, deciding to focus on the present to prevent other beasts from smelling the blood. Heaving the massive carcass over his shoulders, the guy concludes that at least he can skin it before heading home. Walking with that absurd weight on his back, he mentally thanks his grandfather for teaching him how to butcher chickens and rabbits in the past. Under the full moonlight, Jo-won feels a great sense of peace, imagining how proud the old man would be to see him handling the situation so well. As he continues on his way back, the big guy goes back to racking his brain, trying to figure out how to train these magical abilities. Far away, the atmosphere inside the small wooden cabin remains warm and cozy near the wood, burning stove. Preparing dinner cheerfully, Lizzie affectionately asks the little girl to hand her a bowl. As soon as the little one obliges, the woman thanks her, using the new name Dorothy very naturally. Getting a nice pat on the head, the girl agrees, happy and proud to be helping her mother in the kitchen. She runs excitedly through the room but suddenly stops when she notices strange movement outside. Curious, the child leans on the edge of the wooden window to peek into the darkness of the forest. Dorothy squints, trying to see what's approaching in the dead of night. Suddenly, the terrifying head of the giant wolf appears right at the window, making the girl let out a deafening scream of terror. The little girl runs back, crying in desperation, believing the monster outside is about to break into the house. Hearing her daughter's panic, Lizzie doesn't think twice and grabs the kitchen knife she was using at the counter. Wielding the weapon, the woman runs toward the child, telling her to get away from the window as fast as possible. However, when she looks outside, the young woman is completely shocked by what she finds. Emerging from the shadows, Joan finally arrives in the cabin's yard, carrying the massive carcass on his back. Believing her husband is under attack, Lizzie screams desperately as she runs for the door. She bursts out of the house calling for the big guy, who drops the animal's dead body onto the yard. Seeing that the beast was already dead and the stranger was in no danger, the woman freezes in her tracks with the little girl hiding behind her. Lizzie stands frozen holding the blade, unable to process the fact that he took down a monster like that all by himself. In her shock, her fingers relax, and the knife falls to the dirt with a metallic clatter. Gently holding Lizzie's shoulders, Joan tries to calm her down, assuring her that everything is fine and he wasn't seriously injured. Little Dorothy approaches, crying hard, and tightly hugs the big guy's leg. He looks into his wife's eyes and guarantees that he only got a bite on the arm, and it's already completely healed. Now sitting on the lawn, the stranger hugs them both, reassuring his family and telling them not to worry. Suddenly, the young woman tightens the hug, hiding her face in his chest, which surprises the guy. Greatly relieved, she cries softly, repeating over and over how happy she is that he's safe. Noticing that the little girl is also murmuring similar words of concern, our MC feels the weight of their warm reception. Watching them both cry, he swears to himself that he will do everything he can to never let them get that scared again. The day breaks peacefully, illuminating the forest around the small wooden cabin. In the daylight, the stranger places the wolf's carcass on a worktable to process the meat. Without wasting time, he sinks a sharp knife into the animal's belly and starts pulling back the hide. But the job proves to be quite exhausting, showing that doing it all alone is harder than just watching his grandfather work. Wiping sweat from his face, Joan cuts a nice piece of meat and decides to try a different method later. Satisfied with the result, he tells himself it's time to finish the task once and for all. A moment later, Lizzie appears, walking to the doorway and calling her husband's name. The guy turns his head upon hearing her sweet voice echoing from outside. Holding a large wooden bucket, she approaches slowly and calmly calls his name again. Placing the container on the ground, the woman asks him to put the meat inside, leaving the big guy a bit confused. He quickly understands the request through her gestures, realizing her intention is to collect the game. Scratching his chin, our MC racks his brain, trying to remember how to pronounce the word "thank you" in this different language. He says the term with some difficulty, completely surprising his young wife in the middle of the yard. Lizzie freezes for a moment, her cheeks blushing at the sudden thanks. Seeing her silence, the stranger scratches the back of his neck, worried he butchered the pronunciation. However, the woman soon smiles warmly and points to herself, confirming the word in a very helpful way. In a swift movement, Joan takes a wide step, closing the distance between them. He returns the smile and offers a new "thank you," much more confident this time. Replying that it was nothing, the woman looks away, feeling her heart race with him so close. The guy goes back to putting the meat in the bucket, while his wife nervously adjusts her clothes, helping with the work. She thinks she only brought an empty container and doesn't understand why he's so grateful for something so simple. Crouched side by side, the woman feels embarrassed, remembering this is the first time she's experiencing so many new things with someone. Lizzie feels her face burn, recalling the unexpected kiss they shared moments ago. Walking back to the house, she tries to deal with the overwhelming embarrassment, but her curiosity gets the better of her. Pressing her hands to her chest, the young woman wonders if the stranger has ever touched other women's lips in the same way. Faced with so many mixed feelings, the girl feels like crying as her own heart pounds uncontrollably. Meanwhile, Jo-won rests his hands on his knees, taking a brief break from the hard work. Watching the scene from a distance, she finds his behavior very strange, as women usually handle this task. Carrying 2 wooden bowls, the wife wonders why this man acts as if preparing meat is a natural thing for him to do. As she hands him the containers, Lizzie notices her husband leaning in toward her without saying a word. With him getting closer and closer, the young woman panics, believing she's about to be kissed again in broad daylight. Completely frozen, she just squeezes her eyes shut, waiting for the sudden touch. The guy's face passes inches from her shoulder in a very delicate and affectionate way. Jo-won places a gentle kiss on the top of his wife's head, showing genuine affection. Mortified by his thoughtless action, the big guy pulls back, calling himself an idiot and wondering why she closed her eyes. An awkward silence fills the air, with the stranger avoiding eye contact while holding the bucket. The young woman clutches her head, horrified that she acted like a desperate person expecting a kiss on the lips. Determined to clear up the misunderstanding, the stranger calmly approaches her again. Determined not to be embarrassed, Lizzie's eyes fly open as she promises herself to keep them wide open this time. But Jo-won surprises her by holding her face with both hands and giving her a real, affectionate kiss. The couple slowly parts, savoring the moment of pure intimacy. Still a bit dazed by the situation, the guy grabs the bucket handles and takes a step back, asking for Dorothy. Hiding in the doorway, the little girl peeks at them with a look of pure delight, having witnessed the whole display of affection. Turning completely red upon noticing her daughter, the woman flees into the cabin in a total panic. A short time later, the small family walks peacefully through the shaded forest. Jo-won leads the group with the heavy bucket, followed closely by the girl, with the mother bringing up the rear. The big guy smiles, offering a sincere thank you for their help. Seeing that the child didn't respond, he figures his failure to use her name made it hard for her to understand. Stopping mid-path, our MC tries again and calls out Dorothy, clearly thanking her for her assistance on the trip. Radiant of being called that, the little girl smiles, holding onto the edge of the container, full of energy and pride. Later at the cabin, Lizzie strokes the enormous animal hide stretched out on the living room floor. Sitting in the back of the room, the guy finds it strange that the drying process is happening indoors due to the strong smell the hide gives off. Suddenly, he connects the dots and understands her decision to keep the pelt hidden inside. The stranger concludes that the hide of a beast that size is certainly a valuable item for the family's reserves. After finishing her work on the material, the young woman stands up and looks at her daughter playing. Dorothy is lying on top of the monstrous snout, very relaxed, showing no trace of fear of the creature. The mother lets out a sweet, gentle laugh, amused by the little girl's calmness around the slain animal. Jo-won joins in the light mood, breaking into a satisfied smile at seeing his family so happy and safe in his presence. The residence exudes tranquility, isolated among the trees under the bright afternoon light. Tending to the food, Lizzie sprinkles salt over the pieces of red meat, storing the supplies in a larger container. Watching her movements carefully, our MC memorizes the preservation technique, intending to take over this task in the future. Happy to have saved the salt, the wife rubs the seasoning into the meat, very relieved by the abundance of available food. With his arms crossed, the big guy reflects on the endless amount of basic knowledge he needs to master in this place. Staring at the valuable hide on the floor, he decides he will quickly learn the rules of buying and trading goods in the outside world. Determined to stop just resting, Jo-won gets to his feet to return to his daily chores. The sudden movement startles Lizzie, who turns around, nervously interrupting her seasoning of the meat. Waving gently, the husband asks the young woman to remain seated, assuring her he doesn't intend to disturb her household tasks. Jo-won waves his hands in denial and assures her he's rested enough, so he feels no pain and is perfectly fine now. Reassuring his wife with a gentle touch on her shoulder, he tells her he won't overdo it and asks her to stop worrying. With that, the stranger turns and walks outside, leaving the young woman silently watching him go. Out in the forest, the big guy sizes up a tree, thinking its size seems perfect for practicing his wood cutting. Gripping the axe firmly, he remembers oak is good for firewood but admits he doesn't even know what one looks like. Even without experience, he fully trusts his own strength. Without wasting time, he delivers a heavy blow against the trunk, sending wood chips flying everywhere. The impact of the blade echoes loudly through the woods, demonstrating the weight of the swing. After a lot of continuous effort, our MC wipes the sweat from his brow, panting, and has to lean on the tool's handle to rest. Completely exhausted, he learns firsthand that felling trees requires much more technique than just brute force. Late afternoon soon approaches, blanketing the small wooden cabin in the warm light of the setting sun. Opening the door, Jo-won enters, carrying a basket full of firewood on his back after finishing the day's hard work. Lizzie's eyes widen slightly in surprise to see her husband arrive, while little Dorothy hides behind her mother. Worried about the weight, the woman quickly runs toward him, wanting to help with the load. The guy sits on the floor, completely exhausted as he unloads the firewood, but he's confused when his wife kneels beside him. Gently wiping a cloth across her husband's sweaty face, she takes care of him, while the big guy tries to tell her he's fine. Thanking her affectionately for her care, he leaves the young woman speechless, just enjoying the quiet moment under Dorothy's watchful gaze. Suddenly, the little girl dashes down the house's hallway, her little feet pattering on the wooden floor. She runs to a basin full of clean water and eagerly dunks a piece of cloth into it. Right after, the child runs back as fast as she can, dripping water all over the floor. In a sudden leap, Dorothy slaps the soaking wet cloth right onto the stranger's face, startling the couple with her abrupt action. With water running down his hair, Jo-won freezes in place, not understanding what just happened. Taking the cloth from his face, he realizes the girl's good intentions, while Lizzie panics, waving her hands, trying to apologize. The little girl looks at the man with big, shining eyes, anxiously awaiting a positive reaction for her help. Melted by her cuteness, our MC gives her a gentle pat on the head and offers a very sincere thank you. Thrilled with the praise, the little one runs back to get more water, making the big guy desperately plead for her to stop. After calming the situation, he holds his wife's hands affectionately and confesses that this whole peaceful life feels like a dream. Until recently, he swore he would never experience such happiness, which is why he wants to do everything he can to keep the smiles on their faces. Night falls over the forest, bringing a cool breeze, while the tranquil sounds of nature surround the isolated cabin. Thick smoke rises from the stone chimney, a sign that the inside of the residence is warm and cozy. Gathered in the middle of the candlelit room, the three of them share a hearty dinner together for the first time. After the meal, the couple directs their attentive gazes to the other side of the room, enjoying the silence. Completely exhausted after a busy day, little Dorothy has already passed out on the floor, wrapped in blankets. The husband finds the adorable scene amusing and exchanges a knowing look with his wife. Very carefully, so as not to wake the child, Jo-won gently lifts her into his arms. Holding the girl securely, he waits for the young woman to get ready, so they can end the night together. The stranger walks slowly to the made bed near the lit fireplace, keeping the room nice and warm. With extreme caution, he places the little girl on the soft mattress and pulls the blanket over her to protect her from the cold. Outside, darkness dominates the silent forest, with only the faint light from the house's window remaining. Near the kitchen, Lizzie washes the dinner dishes, dipping the containers into a basin of water. As she finishes cleaning the utensils, she feels her husband's presence quietly approaching from behind. The guy reaches out and very gently holds the woman's wrist, stopping her from continuing her work. Surprised by the sudden touch, the young woman turns, feeling her heart race and her face flush instantly. Maintaining a calm demeanor, our MC looks into her eyes, waiting for his wife's full attention. Bathed in the dim light of the room, the two stand still in the middle of the room in a moment of pure intimacy and tension. Closing any remaining distance, the big guy pulls her in by the waist, wrapping the young woman in a firm, protective hug. Resting his face near her hair, he tightens the embrace, enjoying the warmth and peace of the moment. Completely red, Lizzie swallows her shyness, assuring herself that this is the natural way a wife should act. Mustering her courage, the young woman raises her trembling hands and touches her husband's chest, sliding her fingers over his clothes. The stranger watches her effort to return the affection with a calm and understanding gaze. Happy with the young woman's small initiative, he breaks into a fond smile, feeling his chest warm. But her courage is short-lived, and she abruptly turns her face away, covering her cheeks, unable to bear the overwhelming embarrassment. Quickly, Jo-won takes his wife's hands before she can try to escape the situation again. Keeping them close, the guy seeks direct eye contact, leaving the woman even more nervous and vulnerable. Tilting his head, he places a gentle kiss on her face and tells his wife it's time for bed. The last candle in the room is extinguished, plunging the small cabin into the deep shadows of the forest night. Arranging the blankets on the floor, the big guy comfortably lies down next to Lizzie to rest together. He places the unlit lamp in a corner, while the woman watches him silently in the dimness. Covering his body, our MC turns on his side, settling in to finally end the exhausting day. Lying on her back, the woman lets out a long, relieved sigh, feeling her face burn with so much happiness. Even with his back to her, Jo-won keeps his eyes open, focused on his own thoughts as he listens to his wife's breathing. Watching the two of them sleeping peacefully beside him, Jo-won feels his heart soften at the peaceful scene. As he accepts that this woman is truly his wife, he mentally pleads for them to never leave this world before he does. Begging any higher power, the guy asks that his new family remain happy until his last day on Earth. Far away, in the grand castles of wealthy nobles, people would never understand the reality of living in such a small space. In the homes of commoners, it is extremely common for all children to grow up sharing the exact same room as their parents. Because of this lack of space, it's impossible to hide from children how a married couple truly spends their nights together. Trapped in her own memories, the young woman remembers the terrifying voice of her former father threatening to hit her if she kept crying. Hidden under the covers, little Lizzie would spend her nights listening to her mother's stifled sobs until dawn. That cruel routine made fear the most constant feeling throughout her painful childhood. Back in the present, she confesses that she always dreaded inheriting the same miserable fate and living surrounded by sadness. Interrupting her dark thoughts, the woman slowly opens her eyes, feeling a completely new sensation. The relaxing sound of wood crackling in the fireplace fills the dark room, bringing unexpected comfort. Not sure when she ended up on the soft bed, the woman is certain she fell asleep on the hard floor. Staring at her sleeping husband's serene face, she realizes with emotion that he even gave up his own arm to serve as her pillow. Cuddled and protected, Lizzie hugs the stranger tightly, feeling a true peace she never thought possible. The next morning, Jo-won wakes up with both of them in his arms and feels an immense relief, confessing that his nights have never been this sweet before. Enjoying the warmth of that embrace, he is certain that the whole world has been changing for the better since he met this woman. But suddenly, the guy slowly opens his eyes upon hearing a slight movement nearby. He looks down, a little surprised by the scene. Lizzie nestles even closer to her husband's chest, mumbling softly and cutely, making the big guy feel like his heart is going to explode. With his chest tingling with so much happiness, the stranger wishes from the bottom of his soul that this moment could last forever. Time passes, and the morning light begins to stream into the small cabin through a crack in the window. With that, our MC gets up very carefully and covers them both to keep the cold out. Before getting out of bed, he gives his wife's head an affectionate pat, and she lets out a soft murmur, enjoying the touch. A little later, the young woman is already up and walking through the kitchen, holding an empty bucket to start the day's chores. However, she gets a big scare when someone suddenly grabs the bucket's handle. Whirling around, startled, she realizes it's just her husband wanting to help with the chores. Without any effort, the guy lifts a huge cauldron and pours out all the heavy water at once. He then looks at his wife and says something in a completely unknown language. The woman doesn't understand a single word he just said. Noticing her confusion, Jo-won asks if she slept well, calling the young woman dear, which makes her face flush as she freezes up completely. She nods her head very quickly, while the guy wonders if it was his term of endearment that caused such a nervous reaction. Racking his memory, he recalls recently learning a few words like wife and dear from another local villager. Previously, the stranger had asked what he should call the young woman, suggesting using her own name, but only received silence. At that time, Lizzie was mortified and asked in her native tongue to be called dear, which finally made it click for her husband. Deciding to test his theory, he calls her dear once more, and the woman hides her face, burning with embarrassment. Unable to handle the pressure, the young woman turns her back, trying to compose herself from the heart attack. Finding her reaction the cutest thing in the world, our MC feels a huge urge to tease his wife a little more. He points to her back and asks his dear to look at him, making the young woman jump in surprise. But just then, little Dorothy leaps out from under the covers, newly awake and full of energy. The little girl stares into space with a sleepy look and starts drooling, imagining a nice piece of meat floating in front of her. Without a second thought, the child throws herself onto the floor and starts crawling to get her food. She gets up and runs through the house, while the big guy greets her by calling her name. But the girl runs right past, completely ignoring the couple, leaving Jawan looking completely dumbfounded. With her eyes shining with hunger, the little one screams, demanding meat first thing in the morning. Clinging to the wooden bucket, the child keeps stomping her feet, demanding her food, while her parents laugh at the scene. Amused by all that energy, the guy repeats her request, trying to calm the little hungry girl down. However, Dorothy nearly climbs inside the bucket, kicking her little legs and screaming nonstop. Laughing out loud at the situation, our MC decides it's time to work hard at hunting to feed his new family. Later, he walks calmly through the dense forest, prepared to face another giant wolf if necessary. Sizing up the sharp axe in his hand, the stranger feels confident for finally having brought a real weapon into the woods. He continues to advance through the trees, his steps firm on the dirt ground. Suddenly, the hunter stops walking, noticing the surrounding environment has become bizarrely dark. Looking around, he wonders where this heavy atmosphere is coming from. Gripping the axe handle tightly, the guy feels a strange shortness of breath despite being in such a vast space. With a grim expression, Jawan mentally prepares himself, imagining what kind of monster is going to jump out at him now. But instead of a roar, he hears calm, rhythmic footsteps approaching on the trail. The big guy is confused and focuses his vision on the mysterious figure that has just emerged from the forest shadows. A man covered in a dark cloak walks toward him without any hurry, revealing himself to be an older, bearded man. The stranger stares at our MC with a deep and mysterious gaze. Feeling the strong tension of the moment, Jawan breaks into a cold sweat before this presence, mentally wondering who this mysterious figure could be.